scale is a series of tones and semitones. If you recall, we looked at frets on the guitar, single fret movements being semitones, and 2 frets on the guitar being a tone. So a major scale is a series of those tones and semitones in a very specific order. And that order is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So as I said to you before, if you can really get into your mind that chromatic scale, so you know it verbatim, and then the next bit to really get nailed into there is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, then you're well on your way to understanding the fundamentals of Western music theory. So on the screen we can see a series of tones and semitones, and then above that we have our chromatic scale as a reference point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in the numbers, the numerical numbers of the notes of the scale, and you can see that it's 1 to 8, and 8 is the octave. It's the same note as the first note, it's just an octave higher, and that'll become clear in a second or two. So if we work our way through this formula, if you like, and we start at number 1, and we put, for instance, the letter C in, the note of C at the beginning, and then it tells us to go a tone higher than C. So tone higher than C is a D. And then if we carry on through the formula, then you can see it starting to fill in all the notes of the major scale. So a tone higher than C is a D, a tone higher than D is E, a semitone higher than E is F, a tone higher than F is G, a tone higher than G is A, a tone higher than A is B, and then we've got a little semitone jump back to C. And there is the major scale, and it sounds like this. And that's the major scale from C, so this is C major, and up close. Now that's a scale that we're all very much familiar with, whether or not it's played in its straight do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or derivatives of it. That we are so ridiculously tuned in to that scale as Westerners, modern Westerners, it's crazy. So I would wager that 99.9999% recurring pieces of music written post-Bach have been created using the major scale or its relative minor, or one of its relative minor. So it's an important scale, and it's actually one that we utilise to create chords as well, in a very familiar way. And once you've cracked that piece of theory, you've got all 3 bits that you need to learn to play any song you've ever heard. Incidentally, if we take that pattern on the guitar, that pattern of a major scale doesn't change. So that tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone is absolutely set in stone. You know, that is the major scale. So on the guitar, we're not moving frets about, that pattern is always going to look the same. So if we're starting at C, and we wanted to play C sharp major, then we just move that entire box pattern up by a semitone. We play exactly the same thing if we want D, C sharp, D. So by understanding the chromatic scale, by having a pattern that you know and love, you're able then to play any major scale. So by learning one pattern and understanding the chromatic scale, you can play a major scale in all 12 keys. And if you're a particularly boring person like me, then you can sit for hours just running that scale, trying to get it under your fingers and get used to moving it around. So we've got our pattern that we utilise then, the tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and we place C there, but we don't have to place C there. We could have placed E there, for instance, and gone round E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and so on and so forth. And in fact, it's a good practice to kind of write them all out and get used to writing that formula. And I spent years writing out the chromatic scale, and then writing out tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and then filling in the blanks. So that's the scale, but what do you play the scale over? Well, in Western music we harmonise scales to create chords, and then those chords sit within a family of notes, and that note and that family are called a key. So if you look at C major that we wrote out, C, D, E, F, G, A, B and then C, those notes belong together in the key of C major. And therefore any chords we build from those notes are going to have a kinship, they're going to be connected in some way. In fact, they're going to sound very familiar to our ears, and the movements between them will sound right. So how do we do it? Well, it's quite simple really. I'm not going to get bogged down in intervallic descriptions or anything like that, but just take a look at the C major scale. And we're going to start on the first note, we're going to build a chord from it. And we basically start at number 1, and then we jump over note 2 and land on 3 and grab that note. And then we jump over note 4 and land on 5 and grab that note. And those 3 notes together form a triad. And the first triad of any major scale, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be C, if you've used the pattern of tones and semitones correctly, that pattern, that chord will always be major. It will always sound major. So if we take C, E and G, and I play C, E and G anywhere on the guitar, so here's the most familiar place, there's a C, there's an E, and there's a G. That's a triad of C major. But I can play that absolutely anywhere. And then on the guitar there's a lot of repetition, so those 3 notes repeated over and over again in various connotations mean the chord of C major can be played all over the place in as many different variations as you can think of or get your fingers to. So here's one of the rules that I was talking about. We have the chromatic scale, we have tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, which is the major scale, and the first chord of any major scale is always a major one. So the first chord of C major is, strangely enough, C major. So to move on and get the rest of the chords, we utilise the same pattern. You can see we took the first one, jumped over the second one, grabbed the third, jumped over the fourth, grabbed the fifth. If you move that same structure, move it to the second note, we take 2, we jump over one, and then we jump over another, and we take those 3 notes, and the second chord of any major scale is always minor. And if those of you who are clever who are watching out there, you'll see that the difference between that first major chord and that second chord, which has become minor, is the distance between note 1 for C major, which was a C, has got 2 tones between that and the next note, which makes it a major third. And on the guitar you can see that. Here's one tone, here's the second tone. But the D, for instance, that we were looking at there, if you look at the difference between the D and then the F, that's a tone and a semitone, and that interval is called a minor third. So here's a D, there's the F. It just immediately sounds sad, doesn't it? Here's the major third, happy, here's the minor third, sad. So the first chord of any major scale is a major chord, always. The second one is minor. And we basically carry on doing that exact same thing. And we end up with a series of chord types, which you need to kind of get into here. So as I keep saying, and I'm going to keep repeating it in some kind of weird neuro-linguistic programming vibe. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone is your major scale. Sitting underneath that, or built from it, is a series of chords, and those chords are absolutely set in stone, and they are major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So in the case of C major, we have the note of C, and that obviously then, because the first note is going to be the chord of C major. The next note along is D, and sitting underneath the second note of any major scale is a minor, so it's D minor. The next one's E, and that is a minor. The next one's F major. The next one's G major. The next one's A minor. The next one's B diminished. and then we're back to C major. So you can actually, if I play those, run those through, you can actually hear in the chords. And that's harmonised, completely harmonised the major scale. So up close these chords look like this. So that's harmonised that major scale. And you don't need to go through that process every time of going, take the first note, jump over, take that one, jump over. You know, it's easy enough if you can just remember your tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and then remember under each one, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, then you're on your way there. And what this is going to help you to do is understand that if you see a couple of chords that sit together, they're only going to sit in certain places in a particular key. You can see that there are only 3 places where a major chord can sit, and there are 3 places where a minor chord can sit. So if you see a minor chord written out somewhere, it's got to be sitting in one of those places. And the thing that's going to define where it is and which key it is in is going to be another chord that you can see in the song. So for instance, if I saw A minor, I go, well, okay, it's A minor, that could sit in one of 3 places in any particular key in a major scale. But if then I saw a D minor and a C major, you know, it's starting to narrow down the keys that it could possibly be in. Anyway, not to get too deep around that. That is the major scale. That's how it's harmonised. And if you're not sure how to play the chords I've just shown or been playing on the guitar, this is what they look like at close up. So you might be thinking now, yeah, okay, why is he showing me this? He's showing me the chromatic scale in order to define this major scale, and then he's showing me how to harmonise that to build a few chords. So why? Well, it's, you know, as I mentioned before, it's going to help you to understand what's going on in another song, the song that you're trying to work out. But equally, it's going to enable you to write your own song straight away. So if you can play those chords that we were just talking about, and you understand or have a grasp of that major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, then you can basically pick any of those chords and play them in any kind of style and order, and they will work together. There's the first chord, there's the 4th chord, there's the 5th chord. And that's a really kind of famous chord progression, 1st, 4th, 5th, a 1, 4, 5. You'd have heard that a million times over in a million different styles and genres. For instance, in jazz, they utilise a 2-5-1 a lot of the time. So you're looking at the 2nd chord in any particular key, the 5th chord, and then the 1. Doesn't matter what it is, obviously it's always going to be minor, and then in fact a dominant 7, but a major, and then back to 1. So chord progressions are really important, and you're going to define them by the numerical values. You'll hear people say, this one is a 1-6-2-5 in the key of C. So that would be C major, A minor, D minor, and then G major. Okay, so we've covered the chromatic scale, we've covered the major scale and how that's created from intervals of tones and semitones, and then we've harmonised that scale, so we've got a series of set in stone chords that work together in a particular key. But you might be thinking, that's all well and good, they are the basic triads of major and minor, but what are all these other chords with extra numbers written on the end, like 7 and 9, 11 and 13 for instance?